Welcome to American Mogul. Here we attempt to answer universal questions with intuitive knowledge, based in sound logic, empirical and scientific data filtered through the lens of theoretical and practical methodology. To answer the why and attempt to properly illuminate the why, so you may have a better understanding of the universe around you. Recap: what are common human coronaviruses? There are 4 main subgroupings of human coronaviruses, and they are thought to be predominantly transmitted through contact with bodily fluid from an infected person by acts like coughing and sneezing. Microscopic droplets produced by the infected person can be inhaled by someone nearby, usually within an 18 to 24-foot radius, or they can also be transmitted via contact with a contaminated surface and then inadvertently touching one's face or rubbing one's eyes. How is COVID-19 different? SARS, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and now COVID-19, Coronavirus Disease 2019, are zoonotic coronaviruses. These are viruses that have jumped the species barrier from their normal animal hosts to humans. This can happen through direct contact with an infected animal, as well as indirect contact or eating contaminated food. Zoonotic diseases are also very common, and once transmitted to humans, they can spread through person-to-person contact as well. Who is, and what is contributing to the transmission of COVID-19, and what can we do to arrest the spread? The undocumented, approximately 7% of the global population. The fastest-growing COVID-19 outbreak that have so far tested positive for the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19 at a rate 10 times higher than the reported infection rates in recent weeks is in meat and fish processing plants across the globe. Beef, fish, pork, and poultry processing has emerged as dangerous new hotspots for the deadly respiratory disease, which can also cause damage to the heart, kidneys, and brain. Hundreds of plants have been forced to temporarily halt operations amid skyrocketing numbers of cases and fatalities. According to latest reports released, tens of thousands of plant workers have tested positive for the virus, as close to a fifth of the workforce in the largest slaughterhouses and fish processing plants have fallen ill. Large COVID-19 clusters have also appeared in meatpacking plants and fish processing around the world, including Australia, Canada, Brazil, Ireland, and Spain. In 1 or 2 meatpacking plants and fish processing plants you might expect this. However, these outbreaks are clearly a worldwide phenomenon. There is something distinctive about meatpacking plants and fish processing plants that is adding to people's risks of catching COVID-19. So what is it about these places that make them such dangerous incubators for the novel coronavirus? It's a question that urgently needs answers, especially now that concerns over food shortages and an order given worldwide classifying meatpacking plants and fish processing plants as critical infrastructure. They are already forcing workers back to the production line. Like most aspects of the pandemic is complicated by a lack of data. Predicting how exactly the disease is spreading between workers and which meatpacking plants and fish processing plants practices are to blame is going to take time and a lot of epidemiological research. According to the CDC's latest report, the chief risks to meatpacking plants and fish processing plants come from being in prolonged close proximity to other workers. 1,000 people might work a single shift, standing shoulder to shoulder as carcasses roll past on hooks or conveyor belts. Often, workers get only a few seconds to complete their task before the next slab of meat or fish arrives. The frantic pace and grueling physical demands of breaking down so many carcasses can make people breathe heavily and have difficulty keeping masks properly positioned on their faces. To allow for social distancing, the agency recommended that meat processors slow down production lines to require fewer workers, and that they stagger shifts to limit the number of employees in a facility at one time. Those interventions should help, though not all people with COVID-19 get fevers. Daily nose swabs to detect the live virus inside people's bodies would be better, but hard to achieve as long as diagnostic testing is still limited. When one processing plant began working, with the state health department testing its workforce, more than 400 employees tested positive. All of them were asymptomatic. And meatpacking plants and fish processing plants have other own unique characteristics that are awkward to modify, like the very cold temperatures and aggressive ventilation systems required preventing meat and fish from spoiling or getting contaminated with pathogens that cause foodborne illness. It is exactly these features that could also be contributing to the high rates of infection among slaughterhouse workers. Low temperatures allow the virus to stay viable outside the body for longer, increasing the survival of the virus in the air. In meatpacking plants and fish processing plants, where air speeds typically exceed 100 times that of other plants, infectious droplets and aerosols would get pushed much farther much faster. Everywhere else, though, the risk of infection is likely to increase, because the increased air speed may transport the aerosols farther, where they can reach additional susceptible people. Then the larger questions become: what about cross-contamination? Knowing that approximately 30% of all meat and fish processing plant workers have contracted the virus, then what? Are the meat and fish products contaminated and then shipped to grocery stores around the world? There are no definitive studies. However, can we ascertain that all these products are shipped contaminated or not? There are not as of yet any definitive studies available. So then the question should be, how long can the coronavirus be viable on raw meat and fish? Though definitive experiments have yet to be conducted, studies are urgently required to examine such instances and assess their significance for transmission of COVID-19. However, physical conditions inside these plants probably aren't the whole story. Social and economic factors play a more significant role. The undocumented and the need to help them. Approximately 7% of the global population. Meat and fish processing is an exhausting, dangerous, labor-intensive job done primarily by underpaid, undocumented workers and recent immigrants around the world. Out of necessity, many of them live in multi-generational homes or other crowded housing environments. They also ride company-operated buses for an hour or more each and every day to and from the plants, which puts them in prolonged close contact with other potentially infected people. Other types of farm workers, including those who pick fruits and vegetables, face similar challenges when it comes to social distancing at home, in the fields, and in between. If they do become sick, undocumented workers often lack access to testing and health care, which means they spread the disease and continue clocking in until their symptoms become so bad they can't work. Many of the undocumented do not have phones or are fearful of providing phone numbers that might aid teams of contact tracers investigating an outbreak. Their undocumented status makes them less likely to seek medical care if and when they do get sick, particularly under restrictive immigration policies. All of these factors, on top of the realities of working in a giant refrigerator slick with water and blood and packed with human and animal bodies, make processing workers a particularly vulnerable population where the coronavirus has now found a foothold. While there's still a lot more to learn about the specific transmission dynamics of local outbreaks, the same principles should apply to non-urban areas. Meat processing plants are just one example. Prisons, homeless shelters, long-term care facilities, and cruise ships all follow a similar pattern. If you stick a bunch of people in close quarters for long periods of time, the virus will inevitably spread. A call for temporary global amnesty from deportation for all the undocumented. Approximately 7% of the global population are the undocumented. Additional studies are urgently required to examine such instances and assess their significance for transmission of COVID-19. A special request to Sundar Pichai, Chief Executive Officer of Alphabet, please help us raise awareness and help spread the information necessary to help humanity.